Live tonight for the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway, LSR TV is happy to say good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to tonight's special coverage of the Sim Racers for Mental Health All-Star Race, as our coverage of the 2019 Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series powered by Sim Racers for Mental Health continues. Coming off of an off week, and our first and really only non-points event we'll see this season gets us ready for next week's race at Charlotte here tonight from Concord, North Carolina. As always, though, we're happy that you're spending your Monday evening with us on LSR TV and the iRacing Esports Network. Myself, Evan Pasoko, alongside Justin Prince upstairs with our producer Brett Wheeler bringing us to you this evening. And Justin, tonight we have the best of the best on track, all for bragging rights, and it starts with a couple of heat races coming up in 5 minutes.
Yes, indeed. 24 drivers are set to take the grid for tonight to try and figure out where they're going to be starting for the All-Star race to try and get the best track position. And don't forget, this is with the brand new drafting package we've talked so much about. It's the first time we're seeing it here at Charlotte, meaning it's going to be absolutely crazy under the lights and under the dusk, especially for this open race to decide who's going to start up towards the front and who's going to have to pass a whole heck of a lot of cars in just a few minutes.
And of course, it is a new-look Charlotte Motor Speedway as well. Of course, now having the new Roval configuration and the various different changes that have happened around the Speedway, that has all now come to fruition. So Charlotte Motor Speedway may look a little bit different than the last time we were out here on a Monday night, but it is the same old beast. And the big thing to keep in mind for these heat races coming up, again, it is 24 cars on track. We'll split them up into two, and it is going to set the field for the All-Star race coming up in just a little bit. That will be consisted of 3 stages. We'll break down that format in just a little bit as well. However, as these drivers wind down their qualifying session to get ready to go, 2 major points. Number one, normally we race here under the lights, Justin. Tonight, the sun's beating down. There's a lot less grip in. A point that you mentioned, a pre-race there, because it's a more recent scan of the racetrack, that surface has started to wear a little bit more. There are a lot more bumps than what there used to be.
Yeah, it's kind of comparable to some drivers, more towards what Atlanta is on the surface, where it's more rough, more rigid in terms of how many bumps you're feeling throughout the corners. But it's also one that's fairly fun because while it is more bumpy, it also has that little bit of a new track kind of feel for these drivers. I think we're going to see a lot of different lines tonight for these drivers to try and work their way around the bumps and trying the best find the best grip, especially under the dusk here tonight.
Your even-numbered qualifiers are going to be coming up in the second of our 2 heat races. Let's take a look at 1, 3, 5, and everybody else. Here's your LSR TV starting grid for qualifying heat race number 1. Fastest time out of all of them, 29.298. Connor Horn is going to bring heat race number 1 to the green flag this evening. He will be joined on the outside of the front row by the number 12. That'll be Skylar Shackelford. Back row 2, Brian Chambliss will start tonight in 3rd position. David Washington ends up in 4th. And through your top 5 is Jeremy Bazemore.
6th position is Anthony Frederick, starting right in front of row number 4 of Jonathan Goodell and Matt Miller. Andrew T. Jones sits in the 9th position, with Jeremy Rittenberg rounding out the top 10, Evan.
And in the final couple of drivers, it is Sean Kalis rolling from the number 11 spot. Kyle Kamer will roll from 12th, and that is going to be the complete look top to bottom at your LSR TV starting grid for heat race number 1. 12 drivers now, 12 drivers later, and of course they have to go through numerous sets of qualifying just to make it to the main show. It'll be fun elimination racing when we do get to that main event. Again, we will talk more about that when we get closer, but as these drivers get set to roll off now behind the iRacing.com pace car adjusted, A, they just had to qualify for 2 laps to get into this heat race, and then B, of course, these heat races going to determine where they end up starting when we go racing for segment number 1 in the main event.
Yes, indeed. 20 total laps for each of these heats, as we've talked about a little bit. And these drivers want to make sure they have the best run out of these first few heats for feature number 1 tonight. Basically, for these drivers, it's going to be about who's going to be able to manage a lot of the tire wear and manage a lot of the runs that you see with this package. You can hold the car wide open potentially, as much as 5+ laps at this point here at this facility. It's going to be an absolute thriller for these drivers to determine where they're going to be starting for feature race number 1 tonight, Evan.
Yeah, some drivers up close to the front of the field could be holding down the right foot for as much as almost half of the start of this 20-lap heat race. It is going to be a fun night of action, and again, there are no points on the line. There are still penalties to be assessed. Penalty points would not carry over, but you can't just go out there on a whim. If you do cause 2 accidents, you are going to be done for the night. But these drivers are funning for bragging rights. It's going to be a fun night of action. We're happy that you're with us once more for the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway to unofficially get All-Star Night kicked off. We look for the pace car to dive down at a turn number 4, and the field is in the hands of Connor Horn. Let's go racing from Charlotte. Green flying in the air. It's heat race number 1.
And a great start for these drivers heading into turn number 1. Everyone didn't have an issue getting into the gears, but Horn already off to a good launch. The thing is, though, that we've seen many times with this package, it's hard to keep the lead if you are the leader at the start of the race. Here comes the pack trying to find its way, tangle drafting to the outside.
You can see with that 2019 package just how hard it is to get away. It is going to be Connor Horn for the first time at a turn number 4, defending the race lead, but we are still 2 by 2 by 2. Your top 6 cars, only a quarter of a second separated them that last time, and the outside's doing a good job of hanging strong. Here comes Shackelford, a nose to the quarter panel. He'll get a run now down the back straightaway, nose to nose for the race lead.
Yeah, and he's working a little bit with David Washington, but just, I think, lost his drafting partner. Washington had to get out of the gas into turn number 3, and that really chucked up the entire outside line. And I think Horn's going to have a little bit of advantage for the time being with all these chuck-ups on that outside line, making it hard to get around him in that Speedway Chevrolet.
All 12 of your drivers are able to start heat race number 1, and you can see most of them in any given camera shot. The last time, after 2 laps, they were only separated by a second at most. Inside, though, still the place to be for Horn. He'll lead out of turn 4, and finally slides up in front of Shackelford. I think the 12, a little bit of a blip of the throttle there, lifts. He'll tuck in line second, and third was awfully tight. Chambliss tried to stay to the inside of Washington, couldn't do it, and now the 98's going to go to the outside.
Yeah, and he's starting to gain a little bit more ground back. Again, had to check up a little bit before in turn 3. He's actually taking a bit of a different line than many of the drivers. He's getting off the throttle on the entrance of turn 3 to try and come down to the middle line. That loses him some momentum, but I think he's trying to make sure that right front tire doesn't burn itself out by going too aggressive at this point. And he knows once the drivers have to start lifting a little bit past that lap 9+ point, that could come towards his hand in that 98 machine.
Look how close we are in the battle for the race lead as the 12 and 98 were right on each other's door, and it looked like Shackelford got pinched low. Washington didn't give him a ton of space. He had to lift, and now a big gaggle of cars as the top 2 pull away. Horn, Washington with some space, and then it is the battle between Shackelford and now Brian Chambliss for third. Behind them, it's Fredericks finding the number 78, a Matt Miller, and you got Bazemore. You've also got Rittenberg in this fight, as again, the top 10 aren't getting away, and everybody's still on the gas. Nobody that time at a quarter dropping below 175.
Yeah, that's the thing with this package. While it's not as quick on the straightaways, there's a lot more speed. Big crash, though, into 1.
Caution flag is out for the first time. It is the one of Jeremy Bazemore. Heavy damage, and the caution flies at lap number 7. After it looked like this race was getting set to go into the long haul, the LSR TV replay will show the tail of the tape. It was a little bit of a sandwich situation. Bazemore tucked in line behind Jeremy Rittenberg, I think, trying to make a move to the outside as Kyle Kamer got a run on him. And basically all of those cars started to drift high into turn 1. They ended up hooking Bazemore hard into the outside wall, and Andrew T. Jones in the 64 was way behind where all of that started. Got huge damage when he came in and hit the 1 car.
Yeah, you hit a run on the head for the cause of the caution. Basically, Bazemore trying to make sure he didn't fall out of line for behind the back of Rittenberg. Not clear of Kamer. They both slam into the wall. It's just unfortunate, though, for both Jones and even more so significant damage for Jonathan Cadell in that Mission 22 machine that ran into the back of Andrew T. Jones very hard. That's going to hurt their chances for the rest of this Open for their positions on the racetrack because of the circumstances here. But everyone seems to be coming down to the pit lane.
Whoa.
No, Horn fakes the ball out.
Connor Horn dives out at the last second. Shackelford back up top. Miller, Rittenberg all decide not to come down to the pit lane. And what looked like was going to be a universal decision to come in is now a split call with half the drivers in, half the drivers staying out.
And I'm curious to see how this works out. We're going to be about halfway to go in this, about 10 laps to go. One of the main questions with this package we've seen at some of the tracks is, can you afford to stay out on older tires? At Kansas, if you stayed out on the older tires unless you were in the peak race, the answer was no. Here, this is going to be a bit of testing throughout the entire week for these drivers, mind you, to see, is this going to work, say, for the All-Star race in general to be able to stay out? I'm curious to see how this gamble is going to play out, but it's going to mean the drivers that stayed out aren't going to be able to get on the throttle or stay full throttle after the first lap off the restart.
And we'll see, therefore, as the advantage swings to the cars towards the back of the pack who just came down to the pit lane. Are they going to be able to make something happen? Are they really just going to be able to find a way around those cars in front? Keep the foot down, that's one thing, but if there's nowhere to go, they're 2-3 wide in front of you, you're kind of stuck. This also may give us a small indication. You talk about, of course, the upcoming week of racing on Charlotte. It'll be a completely different story tomorrow night as the Peak Series goes racing for 200 laps. That will be found right here on the iRacing Esports Network. It's going to be different when we come racing back here again next Monday for our 150 lapper for the Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series powered by Sim Racers for Mental Health. But those who just pitted, Justin, are pretty much getting set for a 10-lap run to the end. That is the length of the shortest and final stage in our All-Star race coming up. Again, if you're just tuning in, these are our opening 2 heat races to set the field and qualify for that race. That will start with a 30-lap run, including a mandatory pit stop, a 20-lap run, a 10-lap run, all while eliminating drivers as we go. So that's going to be the focus at the end of the night. Will be main event racing here in no more than a half hour or so, but it does give drivers a small indication of what's to come. I am surprised, though, Connor Horn's decision to go out, because typically as the leader, I guess the thought process is, you know, if I come down to the pit lane, everybody else is going to jump out, but I don't know if all those other drivers don't come down pit road unless Horn does it. It feels like they were responding to the 24. I feel like if he stayed down there, everybody would have pitted.
Yeah, I think everyone would have, exactly. And for some drivers, I think they're thinking the same thing. Why didn't you take tires? It's a little bit of a gamble in case this doesn't work out. But again, this is something I think he's trying to see to work. Let's say if we get a situation like this in segment 2 or even segment 3, will it work out? I still don't know if I like the call specifically, but it's going to be clear. I'm curious to see if this is going to work for Connor Horn and the rest of the drivers who stayed out, or if everyone who took 4 tires is just going to blow by them or try and make it 3 wide after the first lap or 2.
And evidently it is going to be a little bit shorter than a 10-lap run, because 10 laps down, 10 to go this time, but to start-finish on, we are doubled up, and there it is, as the lights do go out on top of the iRacing.com pace car. So we get set for a 9-lap run to the end of this thing. Horn and Chambliss going to be on the front row. Of course, of your 12 drivers, all of them are going to be in the main event, but when we start to make our eliminations in that 30-lap opening run, where our 24-car field will be cut down to the top 16 after those opening 30 laps, it is not fun to be starting back in the 20s. And unfortunately, Jeremy Bazemore and Andrew T. Jones are going to DNF this heat race, 11th position and 12th position. That's going to put them probably in 21st and 23rd for the main event. So tough break for those two drivers who go behind the wall. Also involved in that was Jonathan Cadell. The 69 got a good bit of damage. He's a lap down, but he is still on track, currently scored in 10th, and can maybe pick up a spot on the All-Star grid by staying out there if somebody else is to find some issues in the 9 laps that are still to come. But again, it's Horn, Chambliss, Shackelford, Miller, and Rittenberg. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with a restart due up and up to the 24 car to decide now as he controls this one how early he wants to get that number 24 Speedway entry off and underway. Pace car to dive down. It is Connor Horn's field to control as he brings him now up and onto the throttle. Back underway. 9 to go in Heat Race 1.
And I'm not sure with this package you want to be out that far. He's already up to 3-4 car lengths into turn 1. That's also helped out his teammates lined up behind him in Shackelford and Chambliss. But the drivers on fresh tires are starting to already weave their way around David Washington. Watch him on the bottom. He's in 6th spot. We'll see how he is in turn number 3 with those 4 freshies already breezing by 5th.
Yeah, he makes a nice move at a 70 to Matt Miller. Again, Washington, first car on 4 tires, but look behind him also with fresh rubber. Here comes Anthony Fredericks on the inside line, and because the 24 Horman early as the 98, the 26 get awfully tight into one, another move to the inside now, this time at a 45 at Chambliss. I think Horn going early, Justin, and spreading these cars out single file is helping the cars on fresh tires. If your leaders were too wide like the start of the race, there'd be no room, and instead it is a one-way trip to the front on the inside. Washington rockets to P2.
And the fresh tires are outbeating the old tires 0.3 of a second quicker that time by the stripe. Washington was actually as high as nearly a half a second quicker 2 laps ago. He's gonna rush for the race lead.
Inside line, it's not even close. Contact as Horn throws the block, tries to pinch, and the 24 off pace on the outside. They'll go 3 wide around him. Connor Horn did everything he could, but you can only do so much to fight those 4 fresh tires, and the decision to pit was the right one. Washington to the race lead. Fredericks, though, right there on his bumper, follows him to P2. So those two drivers may not yet fight this one out amongst themselves. Certainly, though, made it look easy on the inside, being able to make that car stick on the center while not getting out of the throttle.
Yeah, and that was a major miscall, it looks like, for sure, with those old tires. Huge block, though, for the 2nd spot, meanwhile, because it looks like Fredericks is prioritizing blocking the bottom and not allowing anyone underneath, compared to leaving any room for chance for Kyle Kamer behind him at this point. Blocked him nearly to the quad oval grass. He might try and do it again this time. He gets an air burst.
We'll see if that does come. Of course, Connor Horn now continues to trickle back down through the field. He caught the wall again. There's a lot of battles as the no tires and 4-tire cars continue to intermingle mid-pack, but up front, it looks like David Washington is secured about a pretty steady 0.3 of a second advantage over Fredericks as they fight for what would be 1st and 3rd to start the opening round of the All-Star. Kyle Kamer, also an impressive run for the 8 car. He started 12th, and he's gone to 3rd. Only driver top 5 to have started outside the top 10.
There's a reason he's been 2nd in the points. While he hasn't been able to find victory lane quite yet in 2019, he's shown a lot of good speed in his shovelway. There's a reason he's been one of the more consistent drivers. One of the drivers that hasn't been in a lot of incidents so far, and has turned some of the most laps all season for the season.
Just continuing to look through now to see if there is, one more shoe to fall in this race side by side. Brian Chambliss and Sean Kalis, they're going to duke it out for P5 and P6 as we take 2 laps to go in heat race number 1. And just as it was when those fresh tire cars came through at the inside line, it is going to be the inside upper hand for the 43. Kalis takes that spot away and may be able to get one more. He's all over Shackelford in turn 4 for the penultimate time.
And I think there's a strong chance he can do it as they reach lap number 20. White flag up in the air. All he has to do, get to the inside, and I think he can blow right by Shackelford.
And it looks like the 12 machine sees that the 43 wants to go to the inside. He'll hold it. And it'll force Kalis to the outside, side by side. This fight is for 4th position, final lap of this heat race, but it is going to be Kalis high side tires to get that spot, and in front of him at a turn 4 checkered flag, David Washington wins heat race number 1, securing the top spot for the All-Star. Fredericks right on his heels in 2nd position, along with Kamer, Kalis, and Shackelford. That final lap pass makes a difference in our top 5.
Yeah, the fresher tires came out in a big way, with Chambliss falling all the way back to P number 6. Connor Horn came away in 7th after leading the first half of the race and getting some damage from that contact on the pass for the race lead. Jeremy Rittenberg, Matt Miller, Jonathan Goodell rounded out the top 10. We did have the 2 DNFs, though, of Jeremy Bazemore and Andrew T. Jones. But, Evan, it's time to look at who's going to decide the even number positions for the All-Star.
And it is the even-numbered positions from the single-car qualifying session. So let's meet 2, 4, 6, and everybody else. Pole position for heat race number 2 belongs to the number 51 of Scott McClendon. His qualifying time was able to get him 2nd best overall, therefore control. For heat race number 2, Thomas J. George going to be there on the outside of the front row, so look for the number 9 Chevrolet right up in the mix as well. Eric Stanford, Rhett McBride, that's a good 3-4 punch as they make up row 2, just ahead of the 23 of Jeremy E. Miller, who's P5.
6th position right now will be Kurt Rittenberg in the number 44 machine, with John Fowler and Brad Bohr starting alongside Sherman, row number 4. Row 5 for the second heat, Tom Moreno and Brian Spriggs. To round things off, Scott Brotherton, and last on the grid, he did not record a qualifying time. It was Dylan C. Jones in the 03 machine who won that race at Richmond.
The lessons learned from our first heat race is that tires are important, even if it is just a halfway run to the end. I would expect if we see a caution in this race that obviously these drivers were either watching from the sim or from the broadcast at opening heat race and will come down and make the decision to get tires. Everybody who pitted in that first heat race wanted to go with 4. Maybe somebody splits the difference with 2, but again, there is no fear of elimination. Everybody in this heat race gets to go to the All-Star. Of course, though, we're going to cut nearly half of the field by the time we get there. I think a third is going to be gone after the first segment, so you do need to be up towards the front if you want a shot at being the 2019 All-Star winner. So pace car going to head down to pit road. It is the number 51 of Scott McClendon who's going to be the first on the gas. They come into the restart zone. 12 more cars in the final heat race of the night as we get set to go racing again underway.
And not as clean as a start in heat race number 1. The mid portion of the field didn't find a way to get going. I think that time it was the 20 machine of Scott Brotherton around that range. Just couldn't get a good launch. George also having trouble on the high side. Stanford getting some blocks to get to the inside.
And Stanford was able to get high, but then immediately returned to the inside. So much speed for the 19. Here comes Eric Stanford on the inside. And unlike in Heat Race 1, your pole sitter does not lead after the first 1.5. It is Stanford from row 2. He goes to the point as the 51 of McClendon now tries to hold off Jeremy E. Miller, who's got that preferred lower lane.
Yes, right now the thing is, though, no one's behind him to try and help out. And Stanford kind of treating this like a restrictor plate race or a past restrictor plate race when you can really think of it. Trying to protect the air bubble up in the front. Trying to block both lanes. It's going to be hard to try and pass him at this point. In the backdrop, though, Fowler nearly collided with Jones.
Oh, and look at the 22 car. He slides high. He's going to get tagged. And this time, Fowler does get into an incident as he hits the outside wall. And there is now the caution as they wreck further down track. Kurt Rittenberg is around. The 48 machine of Brad Bohr also involved. And there is an early yellow to start heat race number 2. It started right around that 22, as you had mentioned, and I thought we might have gotten away with it. It was the 42 of Morano who pushed up, tagged the 22. He was able to hang on, but further down track, the 44 of Rittenberg never quite got a handle on it, and 3 cars went hard into the inside and then the outside wall.
The initial push part of me was on Brian Spriggs. However, the 22 of Fowler at that same time just slid up the racetrack. You want to hug that blue line that's all the way at the bottom of the racetrack in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just slid on up. Unfortunately, no checkups you're going to get in the All-Star race like tonight. And that just collected Fowler straight to the fence. Then Spriggs, after missing a potential first incident, just ran into the back of Rittenberg trying to check up. Got 2-3 more cars at least. Brad Bohr collected in that one as he got stuck against the fence. Just, man oh man, it was Calamity Corner essentially with drivers overrunning either the exit of the quad oval or the apex of turn 1 and 2.
An early trip down to the pit lane. I know I mentioned that if we got a yellow, everybody would pit, and certainly that was in the context of a pretty much halfway home caution flag, but these drivers obviously felt like they saw enough of a difference that it's warranted to pit after just 3 laps of green flag action. So everybody down pit road, led by race leader Eric Stanford, as the number 19 Ford Fusion gets down and into the box. Right side tires up, left sides as well. It is going to be a 4-tire exchange for him, and nobody else really wants to play the strategy game. 4 is the way to go. Race off for second, but Clendon gonna snag one back as he hops over top of Miller for second and third.
I'm surprised no one actually tried a gamble of 2 tires, knowing it was only about 4 green flag laps essentially, to see how that would feel. But I think drivers are just worried that they might get too loose to try and run full throttle, and that might have played into the strategy game a little bit to make sure they didn't lose the track position on top of what we've seen when there was double the amount of laps on those tires in heat race number 1. The thing is, though, with the caution flag, there's just 7 drivers left on the track without any damage, unfortunately, in this heat race.
Yeah, that was a pretty heavy incident and makes it a little bit more difficult for drivers to just simply get up and get away from that one. So tough breaks, for the likes of Spriggs, who's on the pit lane heavily damaged, Brad Bohr, who's down on the pit lane heavily damaged, and Tom Morano, also one of the drivers, rolling off. But it looks like all those cars are going to be able to get up and off of the pit lane before they lose the lap as the pace car comes through. So in contrast to what we saw in the opening heat race, those drivers are all going to be able to get out back onto the racetrack as Morano does claim responsibility for the incident, or is assessed, I guess, responsibility for the incident after he got up and tagged John Fowler. So he will get the end of the longest line penalty. Again, as noted, that would typically come with penalty points. This is a non-points race that counts penalty points, but if he were to cause a second incident, he would be DNF'd for this race. So something for him to keep in mind, but everybody else lights out on top of the pace car, doubled up. 14-lap run to the end. We'll see if this heat race can get away like the last one with only 1 yellow.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to try and pass Eric Stanford after how he was able to control the runs he got out down the backstretch on the first run of the day today. But keep an eye, I think, on drivers like Miller and George that are in row number 2 and see what they can do, along with even potentially Jones, the teammate for Stanford, to see how he tries to find a way to the back bumper of his compatriot in the number 19.
Race car to head off and away. We saw Connor Horn go early on an earlier restart in heat race 1. It really spread the field out as Eric Stanford buy into that thought process. He waits a lot longer, but does go just before the restart box. It'll be our back and away. 6 laps down, 14 to go in heat race number 2. So the 51 of McClendon, pole sitter, lost that spot, got one back on pit lane, but the car he got back around Miller is on his inside with a head of steam pushed by the 5 car.
Rhett McBride having a huge run on the bottom side. That really held up third row on back. Here comes Miller, though, to the inside with McBride.
And look at the top 4 cars now, all squished in and contact. 19's into the outside wall. Everybody besides the leader in the top 5. Rex in the tri-oval. Big hit for Thomas George. And somehow, no caution immediately. A lot of drivers now through the turf there on the front straightaway try to gather themselves as running away down into turn 3 is Jeremy Miller.
You mentioned drivers getting squished off the exit. That's exactly what happened. McBride just pushed up the racetrack, slammed into Stanford against the wall, went across McClendon's nose, turned George, just in enough of an angle to not draw the caution by the time he reached the new AstroTurf, and we stayed green. A lot of drivers got damage in that one, but that leaves now Miller a sitting duck. It's going to be just him and Jones potentially for a chance to win this heat if we stay green.
And can Jones catch up to him? He sits a half a second back. Is there going to be enough of a draft off of the Miller machine? Miller hits the wall. Your race leader into the fence at a turn 4. And here comes the 03. Jones now, all the momentum in the world, looks to the outside. Can't capitalize right away at a turn 2. He goes high. Miller tries to block. He can't do it. And Jones now to the race lead in turn 3. Can he complete the move, though? If Miller can get back up to speed, the inside is a great place to play defense from.
Yeah, it is, but that right side damage might hurt him for the chance to get speed down the straightaways now. And you're seeing that difference on the entrance of the quad oval. That difference, though, on the inside line. He's able to hold the gas, have a tighter apex. He's going to lose that time, though, off the exit. To the race lead goes Jones. Look who's in the picture now. It's Scott Brotherton.
Yeah, out of nowhere comes the number 20 of Brotherton. Both he and Jones started this race outside of the top 10. Jones from 12th, Brotherton from 11th. And of course, Dylan Jones now rockets out to the race lead, being able to complete that pass on Jeremy E. Miller. Fowler, though, now problems for the 22 car.
Yeah.
He spins at a 4, also after getting into the wall.
Yeah, that was in the backdrop, actually, of that battle. That was starting to heat up for the leaders, unfortunately for him. He hit the wall as well and came down the racetrack and hit that inside pit wall we've seen built for the Roval circuit, essentially. Tom Morano was also extremely slow in that section where he nearly followed them actually into that little chicane area of the road course. But as this is still going on, we stay green. It's now a 3-car battle to decide the winner of this thing with 7 to go this time by.
Yeah, 4th on the back. You're looking at a 4-second differential. It may be a battle for just second position because Dylan Jones, having not pancaked the right-hand side of his car, is starting to stretch it out up front from 1/10 of a second to 3/10 of a lead. That last time through, a slow 44. Kurt Rittenberg stays high. He wants to limp home from P9 to try to salvage a decent starting spot for the All-Star main coming up. But it looks like it is going to be Miller and Brotherton left to fight for the scraps in the wake of the 03 as the 20 car now. Big run at a turn 4. Looks to get to the left quarter panel. He does. To the inside, a fight for second.
Yeah, that Williams Chevrolet, I think, is much more quicker. He doesn't have any damage on that car, and he's been towards the back, yes. But I think he's in a better situation than Miller. The lap traffic, though, is not helping. Miller's just going to use him as a pick at this point. He's going to fight as hard as he can, I think, to try and hold on to the second position. But the more they fight, the more side draft you have between those drivers, and the more Jones can just pull away. He was 3/10 quicker last time by because of that battle.
Yeah, just so good, and not having to deviate from his preferred line. Can, go high, swing low, and I mean, the 03 machine's practically got both of those left side tires down and on that now much wider white line on the inside of the racetrack, nearly using the apron to help him turn. P2 again, though. Brotherton not willing to throw in the towel. He'll look to the inside once more. But again, these tires now starting to wear. These drivers can no longer keep it full throttle all the way around, and it almost swings the advantage from the inside to the outside as Miller can give it a little bit more gas. Right there you see the 20's got to get out of it, and it's going to make it very difficult for him to complete this pass. He's not going to give up, though. 3 more times, he'll have a chance next time through.
Yeah, I think the reason Miller's now running the high side is he's able to carry more on throttle time, as in he's able to stay more on the gas in near full throttle than Brotherton can on that inside line, because he knows Brotherton can potentially push up if he does that and slam into him. That's something you might see, say, in the trucks now these days in the open setups at this racetrack. Miller's using that to his advantage to try and defend this spot. I don't know how long it could stay, though, with a bit more damage on that car. And that's going to allow Brotherton, in fact, with that damage, to pull away to second. Just needs to clear him and try and park the bus.
He does slide up in front, take the line away. There is going to be a return challenge from Miller as he gets that big run to the bumper. Looks high, and maybe he'll try to rim ride it this time around in turns 1 and 2. But it certainly looks like now Brotherton hooks up off, and that might do it. It's Jones first, Brotherton second, Miller in third. These cars continue to pull away ahead of the rest of the drivers. Of course, full running order top of your screen. Only McBride, Stanford, McClendon, George still on the lead lap as we look for the white flag.
Yeah, that's up at the flag stand right now, but it's been a heck of a run so far for guys like Brotherton to go all the way from the back of the field to second. And believe it or not, that entire back row actually could finish 1-2 in this one. Last to first for Jones, second to last to second for Brotherton as he comes out of turn 4, Evan.
It is smooth sailing for Dylan Jones in the 03 machine. Took a couple of hiccups, but the fastest car gets it done. And from the very back, Dylan Jones, 12th to 1st, wins heat race number 2 atop Scott Brotherton. Jeremy E. Miller, who gives him a little bit of a tap there, as they'll switch over to a new session for that All-Star main event. McBride, P4, and Eric Stanford, your top 5.
Scott McClendon finished off in 6th position, 6 seconds ahead of Thomas J. George. George, at one point, was one of the fastest cars on the racetrack before that incident. Brian Spriggs finished a lap down in 8th position. Kurt Rittenberg, 9th. Tom Morano rounded out the top 10. The DNFs also included drivers such as John Fowler in 11th and Brad Bohr, who came away in P number 12. That rounded out the 24 drivers that took the grid in the 2 heat races to set up what is going to be a front row field of ages cars of David Washington and Dylan C. Jones when we hit the green flag for the All-Star tonight, Evan.
And when you want to talk about how important these heat races are going to be as we look to qualify into, of course, and set the grid for the All-Star, we are standing by now with the driver of the number 98 machine, Dave Washington, who will end up with the best starting spot in the feature race. In just a little bit, David, tell us what you were able to learn in these relatively short heat races, and what advantage, obviously, the good qualifying spot's going to give you, given our elimination format coming up.
Yeah, it's pretty much tires. After about 7-8 laps, you're going to want tires. It doesn't seem like you need them, the first couple laps, but with the guys that were on older tires, it made a huge difference. And after those few laps, you get, you can drive right to the front.
Did you expect that to be the case? Because it looked like everybody was going to be coming out of the pit lane until it was a late dive back out by the 24, and then it was almost a split decision. It only ended up being a 10-lap run to the end. Obviously, it was important. So as well, how does that translate into racing for 30 laps, 20 laps, and then, of course, 10 at the very end? Where do you draw the limit on how many laps run or laps to go means that tires will still be of effect?
Yeah, you're not going to want to be in the back trying to run to the front. It'll be kind of difficult. But if you're inside the top 10, I think you'd have a pretty good shot to get back to the front. Not with ease, but I think if you're patient, definitely going to be hard the last 10 laps to do anything. You're just going to have to stay out and just deal with it if you're up front.
We look forward to seeing if you guys are able to pull out a few more checkered flags. You got to get through some segments coming up, but you got a very good starting spot for the All-Star main event. So we appreciate you letting us borrow you here for a second. And congrats on the heat win, and hopefully we'll catch up with you in a bit.
Thanks, guys.
The driver of the number 98 machine, we appreciate his time. David Washington, your Heat Race 1 winner, and Justin as well. Now your trackside with the 03, Dylan Jones, who took Heat Race number 2.
Yes, indeed. Dylan Jones had a completely different type of race compared to his teammate in heat race number 2. You went from last to first. How does it feel to go from 12th on the grid to first at the checker flag?
Well, overall, it feels great, except for the terrifying moments that it took to get there and the immense amount of luck.
Talk us through, first off, the terrifying moments, which is, I think specifically, what happened on the exit of turn number 4 that helped you gain a lot of that track position in part, as well as the big one that happened around on lap 5. Talk us through what was going through your mind as the incidents were happening around you and in front of you in this race.
Yeah, that last one that really put me up into what I think I got second after that big one that didn't bring out a yellow. I was watching 2 other guys wreck going down through the AstroTurf on there. I look up a second later, and here comes, I think it was the 9 car, and I'm not sure how we missed him, but, we missed him, I guess.
How difficult was it to try and battle for positions with this new draft package, in your opinion, especially seeing what's been going on in the first few races this week and what just happened in the first heat race?
Yeah, the new draft package with these short little stints here is going to be interesting. You're going to be running wide open for about half of the run, so I think there's going to be a lot of tight battling. Hopefully everyone can keep the fenders together, and it should be pretty fun.
Real quick, how different is this package, in your opinion, compared to a track like Texas here at Charlotte?
It's quite a bit different. Just the amount of wide open time we have and the aero push you get running behind guys. I'm definitely not a fan of it. It's not the type of racing I enjoy, but it's what we got to deal with right now, so got to make the best of it.
Real quickly, last question. What's your game plan to try and come away as the winner of the 2019 All-Star race?
Survival.
It's that simple here, Evan. Survival. Thank you very much for the time, Dylan.
Thank you.
That was Dylan Jones, winner of heat race number 2. He'll start on the outside of the front row for tonight's edition of the All-Star race for the Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series, Evan.
And we've got, just about 3 times as long a distance in the mains. It was about survival in just those 20-lap heat races. Of course, 60 total laps going to be due up as we get set to go main event racing. And we have set the field, in fact, for the 2019 Sim Racers for Mental Health All-Star Race. So we'll take a quick opportunity to step aside. They'll clean the racetrack off, and we are going to get set to go racing. You're watching LSR TV's continuing coverage of the 2019 Full Throttle Real Sim Racing Cup Series, powered by Sim Racers for Mental Health on the iRacing Esports Network. When we come back, it's All-Star Racing from Charlotte.
The most realistic online racing sim ever made. This is iRacing. Detailed laser scan tracks, fully dynamic real world cars, and over 50 series to choose from. 6 online world championships offering over $100,000 in annual prizes. This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
My name is Steven Corpenos. I'm a senior web developer here at iRacing, and I work on the beta UI. It's funny because iRacing has been around for 10 years, but we want to keep delivering the best possible user experience to our customers, and we've found that the old UI isn't exactly what we're trying to deliver in 2018. We want to use new features and provide the best possible experience when using the sim. One of the projects that I've been working on is some custom heat racing configuration for hosted races. We've been listening to our customers. Everyone's been asking for custom heat races. Maybe you want to tweak a few things with the preset iRacing configurations. Well, now you can using the beta UI. So once you're at the home page of the beta UI, you just go to create a race. Then from there you go to your set race options. And you'll notice here under event types, you can actually choose heat racing. First, I'm going to show you how to create a new format from scratch. You can choose the number of entrants. And as you can see, when I made that change, the change was actually reflected on the right side in the graph. Also, you can use the estimated duration at the bottom of the graph when you're changing the length to see what the total duration of your event will be. In addition, you can customize every aspect of the session information, practice, qualifying, heat races, consolations, and of course, the final feature race. Because the beta UI allows us to develop features that are robust and complex, this feature will be exclusively available on the beta UI. Once you've made all of the changes, you can hit save. Say you forgot what you selected. You can always preview it using the preview format button. We are very excited to release the brand new heat racing configuration feature that will be available in Season 3 of iRacing.
Once again, photo finish here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Will it be Tim Hogan? It's going to be Christopher DeMerit at the line. the most realistic online racing sim ever made. This is iRacing. Detailed laser scan tracks, fully dynamic real world cars, and over 50 series to choose from. 6 online world championships offering over $100,000 in annual prizes. This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
My name is Steven Corpenos. I'm a senior web developer here at iRacing, and I work on the beta UI. It's funny because iRacing has been around for 10 years, but we want to keep delivering the best possible user experience to our customers, and we've found that the old UI isn't exactly what we're trying to deliver in 2018. We want to use new features and provide the best possible experience when using the sim. One of the projects that I've been working on is some custom heat racing configuration for hosted races. We've been listening to our customers. Everyone's been asking for custom heat races. Maybe you want to tweak a few things with the preset iRacing configurations. Well, now you can using the beta UI. So once you're at the homepage of the beta UI, you just go to create a race. Then from there you go to your set race options. And you'll notice here under event types, you can actually choose heat racing. First, I'm going to show you how to create a new format from scratch. You can choose the number of entrants. And as you can see, when I made that change, the change was actually reflected on the right side in the graph. Also, you can use the estimated duration at the bottom of the graph when you're changing the length to see what the total duration of your event will be. In addition, you can customize every aspect of the session information, practice, qualifying, heat races, consolations, and of course, the final feature race. Because the beta UI allows us to develop features that are robust and complex, this feature will be exclusively available on the beta UI. Once you've made all of the changes, you can hit save. Say you forgot what you selected. You can always preview it using the preview format button. We are very excited to release the brand new heat racing configuration feature that will be available in Season 3 of iRacing.
Here of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Will it be Tim Hogan? It's going to be Christopher DeMary at the line.
And back live from the Charlotte Motor Speedway, under the lights we are, and we are set to go racing for segment number 1 of this 2019 Sim Racers for Mental Health All-Star Race. We take a look top to bottom. David Washington and Dylan Jones going to be on the front row, alongside Fredericks, Brotherton, Cameron, your top 5, Jeremy E. Miller, Sean Kalis, Rhett McBride, Skylar Shackelford, and Eric Stanford, your top 10. The rest of the starting lineup going to go across the bottom of your screen, Justin, as qualified from those heat races, but it is time now to chase down the checkered flag, and it starts with this 30-lap segment.
Yes, indeed. You are required to take a pit stop between laps 15 to 20 in this race, whether it's at the green or under yellow at the time of that part of the race. So it's curious to see how the drivers handle strategies, especially for under green, and especially since we'll see much faster times since the track is much colder under the lights.
We start segment number 1 with 24 cars. By the time it's done, the field will be slashed to just 16. Green flying in the air. Finally, we're off in all-star racing from Charlotte. And your Heat Race 1 winner, David Washington, holds the bottom strong. The inside with a 2, now 3-car advantage, with Fredericks coming through and Kyle Kamer in the 8.
And it looks like Fredericks just had enough of a boost to get himself up towards the front. But I think we're going to see even more on throttle time being able to be held by these drivers, since it's going to be more grip for these cars with a much cooler sky, a much cooler track temp, and overcast above the track, even underneath the nighttime skies. This is going to be a crazy all-star race under the lights here.
You've got just that much more to work with compared to the heat races, where there was still some sun beating down onto the racetrack. You got pretty much as best conditions as you could ask for. Fredericks goes to the bottom of the racetrack. He tries to hold. Again, this race is going to get very interesting. When we get to lap number 15, there is that 5-lap window to pit. Whether we are green or not, you do have to come in and make a pit stop. 8 drivers eliminated from this one in 27 laps from now. So while, yes, this battle for the race lead is important, and we will continue to follow it, as Washington got nose-to-nose that time of the entrance to 3, but the inside really helped Fredericks out once he got down and into the corner. The longer we get into this race, the further down on the scoring pylon our eyes will start to trickle towards that number 16 spot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be difficult for some of these drivers still, even though there's this colder racetrack. It's still going to be, if you're wanting to be in the top 16, you want to have that balance between being able to manage when you have runs, when you decide to pass so you don't lose positions by overdriving a corner, trying to gain 1 spot, and in turn losing 5. And as well, knowing where the preferred line is and where the momentum is to use those aero ducts to push your car forward. There's going to be a lot of slicing and dicing, yes, for these first few laps, but I think it's all to really set themselves up for the second half of this race, especially after the pit stop, to try and navigate. Are you going to be able to get to the top 16 if you're in the back? And are you going to be able to play defense and know where exactly you need to be to keep your speed and maintain position, rather than being left as a sitting duck in this race?
There is an early advantage to those top 2 cars. Fredericks has put himself into a very good position, leading the last couple of times around. David Washington continues to try to make the outside work, but those top 2, half a second ahead of third on back. Interesting that Dylan C. Jones, who was your winner of heat race number 2, again, we just spoke with him and Washington before we stepped aside to get ready for this race here. Started on the outside of the front row, but of course that outside line did not get going at all, and Jones has fallen all the way down to P7 right now.
Yeah, he is stuck on the bottom side. Everyone's starting to actually move towards the high line a little bit to try and diamond themselves off to the bottom for the corner exit to ramp it down the track. I don't think he's going to find some drafting help too quickly, though, because Wildhorn's lined up behind him. I can see him, he's doing now. Try and follow everyone else, use the high line, try and get to the bottom potentially for the corner exit, especially off turn 4, and just pass by Jones. This leads to some of the aggression levels we've seen before with an incident with Kamer, where a car came up across his nose trying to hold off the bottom. Jones had to get off the gas to try and make sure he didn't push.
And to keep that car under control, pinched down on the inside line, he's got Connor Horn and Scott McClendon to his outside. Again, all of these drivers fighting with one another, going to be good to go for the first set of eliminations. Again, we go down to 16 cars at the end of stage 1, down to 10 cars at the end of stage number 2. And then it was those 10 drivers who will race it out for the 10-lap shootout in segment number 3 to the end of this race. That doesn't stop them, though, from going 2 by 2, couple of sets of battles on the front straightaway. Again, all drivers looking to get track positioned. Obviously, there is no flipping of the running order at any point, so there is no disadvantage to run it up front. Some All-Star Race formats go on averages, it inverts, and so on and so forth, but it's all about trying to get into the top 16, and right now that battle is on with the number 78 of Matt Miller going the wrong direction right now, having occupied that position for a good little bit, but some cars making moves. Miller up to 15th, and a caution flag is out.
And it's because Rhett McBride in part is against the fence from 3rd position. That battle for the lead was starting to dice itself, as it looked like contact for Fredericks because he got bumped from behind by Washington. That was why McBride was in the fence afterwards, trying to check up to avoid all of it. It looked like just a circumstance of Fredericks trying to block the bottom, Washington not lifting, and like we've seen with the incident before with Kamer in the 8 one of the heat races, drivers are not going to lift in the All-Star race and give you that room as much as you would see in an official race or a points-paying race when there's a lot on the line tonight.
And about as unfortunate of an incident as you could get. We had just taken a look back towards the transfer position when that happened, but it's just a case of drivers not lifting. And the 98 Michigan Washington, as you mentioned, just shoved the number 4 car out of the way. McBride did end up getting loose and getting into the wall as well, so that's how the 5 ends up in all of this. But very clearly, Anthony Fredericks gets the worst end of this deal. The driver who finished 2nd in his heat race and started 3rd and was leading after 10 laps. That car is 110% done.
Yeah, there's no way of coming back from that one. You've seen how many flips he came over and under. That engine's done. That car is destroyed. You don't come back from that kind of an incident in this type of a race for sure in this one. But a few drivers are have to coming down for damage repair. You can come down for damage repair. You just can't come down for tires and fuel at this point of the race. Once that window opens, you have to take that 4-tire pit stop. Surprisingly, though, David Washington is staying out despite severe back-end damage, in part because he got hit from behind by Rhett McBride for what happened in 1 and 2.
And it is interesting that drivers have, come down to the pit lane because, again, this will not negate the fact that they are required to come down and make a pit stop, a 4-tire pit stop, that is, between lap 15 and 20. So I do find this interesting, coming down and pitting now. I would have to think that they're going to want to pit at the very end of that exchange simply because of the fact that, we're barely going to get back green at lap 15. So you're going to want those 3, 4, whatever laps you can to make some moves before having come back down to the pit lane. These guys have been racing all season, and they're certainly capable of making the decisions, but I would think you'd want to stay out because you have to get 4 tires, and that window opens up in just 2 laps, and we're pacing right now.
Yeah, while we're seeing some drivers duck down, yes, indeed, you still have to, I think it's the better strategy again to try and maybe wait till the end of the window in case there's a caution situation. Say you come down to lap 15, there's a chance you get pinned a lap down, and that takes you out of contention for position. You don't want to be in that kind of a situation as a driver, so I can see a lot of these drivers staying out until at least lap 18, 19, or 20 if we get a long run. It's just a matter of, do we get it? Or do we end up seeing the pit stops having to be taking place under caution?
And a little bit of a heated exchange over the driver radio here under the caution flag. David Washington in the 98 was given the end of the longest line penalty. Again, a little bit of a modified claim caution rules for this All-Star race. Typically, you don't claim it and you are found to be responsible, you will get penalized post-race. Of course, there are no penalty points from this, so that is a call that comes down from the tower, and David Washington was given the end of the longest line for causing the caution. He and the 5 of Rhett McBride were 2 of the drivers involved in that, and neither of them could agree on the turn of events which took place to bring out to the yellow flag. So there was a bit of jide back and forth between those two. They are ironically enough going to be towards the back of the field together. The 5 of McBride heavily damaged, but we will see if anything else comes from that. Just keeping you kind of in the loop on what's going on over driver radio as we look to get the lights out on top of the pace car now. And if they do, we'll wait to see. Going to be a very interesting strategy here on the pit stops. We'll see. Pace car lights are out. The mandatory pit window is now open, Justin. You could see some drivers come down pit road, coming to the green flag to get their stop now, try to minimize time lost. I wouldn't be surprised if a bunch of them go for that.
That's going to be very risky, first off, because there's a chance you get run over from behind. But second, depending on where you are in the field, you might not have the pit road open, actually, because if you stayed out, you don't have that ability to do so. I think that's why we actually seen a couple drivers, surprisingly, duck down to the lane, just top up with a little bit of fuel and come back out, like Stanford. John Kalis was in amongst that group that ducked down, dropped to the back, and are now maybe putting themselves to where, because they came down, they'll have the ability to come down a second time as they go to the green flag. Everyone else who stayed out, they don't have that luxury. If you stay out of the 2 to go signal, you get the pit roads is closed signal to you from race control, and you can't come down to the lane at coming to the green flag.
We will see if any drivers do decide to take that gamble. Again, race officials going to have to keep an eye, make sure that everybody comes down to the pit lane and make a 4-tire pit stop at the next 5 laps while also going green. Talk about a Pandora's box of opportunity. Pace car to the safety of pit road. Looks like, your race leader is going to stay up besides the 44. He'll jump down to pit road while Jeremy E. Miller jumps out to the race lead.
And as to be expected, the drivers who came down before the 2 to go signal, able to come into the pit lane for their mandatory stop. Now it's the question, when will everyone else go? They're all staying signal file for a reason. If they go side by side, there's a chance you can get pinned onto the racetrack and not come in when you want to go into the stalls. Curious who ducks down this time by. It looks like George is going to lead them down in the back.
It was Kamer, Jones, and as well the 44
McClendon's
of
around in the
Rittenberg.
pit entry.
McClendon, issues coming down to the pit lane. Just shows you that it's not at all easy. And a spin there as some drivers are exiting pit road. Other drivers now coming down to pit road. And a new unique challenge with Charlotte is there's not normally a pit road wall there. But again, I mentioned off the top, Justin, it is a new version of this Charlotte Motor Speedway. And you saw the contact as they came down onto the pit lane. Scott McClendon trying to get down. He and the 69 car got together.
Yeah, and it's not as simple as one car. If they end up spinning around, they have the risk of going in the grass. With the addition of the Roval, there's that extension of the wall that was put for that final chicane. There was the question of, is that going to be used for the oval? That was actually sticking around for the All-Star race in real life over the weekend. So that's going to be a major challenge now for these cars, in more than just this race, for rest of iRacing, to make sure you don't slide into that safer barrier and destroy your car. An added extra challenge at Charlotte.
There was no yellow. We stayed green, and now your race leader has given up the #1 position. Jeremy E. Miller has come down to pit road. The advantage of where the actual pit road commitment cone is it's about 25-30 feet past where the wall starts. So if you're going to miss pit road, you're not really going to T-bone the end of that concrete barrier. You're going to slap the side of it because it sticks out far enough, but you could have an issue where somebody spins at a 4, they hit that wall, and an otherwise fine race car is going to be junked. But Miller, your race leader, he pits, he takes his mandatory 4 tires and goes. Now it is Scott Brotherton to assume the race lead in the #20 20 car as he's out up top. It is he, Connor Horn, and it looks like those may be the only drivers have yet to come down to the pit lane. They have to come in this time at lap 20. The 20 comes in, but look at Connor Horn around on the outside and makes a pass entering pit road.
Should not, I think Horn maybe might have taken tires when he tried to duck down for that strategy. That'll allow him to gain us a bit more time, but he's also got some damage to deal with that car. He's going to have to deal with a lot of lost time because you can lose as much as potentially 1 or 2 seconds minimum trying to go for an overcut strategy. Per lap you try and do it. Curious where Horn is going to cycle out with all this.
It was a fantastic move to get up and around Scott Brotherton. Brotherton way further down the pit lane after qualifying in the number 4 spot in the 20 machine. Took a long time to get that car set and into the box. He is still taking his tires while Connor Horn is already in the center of 1 and 2. Where is Scott Brotherton going to end up? And who's going to end up being our race leader now? As all of this will cycle through with the 8 laps still to go on the board.
It looks like Kamer's going to come away with the race lead. In fact, all the drivers who ducked down and were able to pit at the green flag because they came with 2 to go are going to be up in the top 3, it appears. Yes, indeed. So Kamer, Jones, and Rindenberg have played this perfectly to get a major advantage by 3+ seconds.
And that's why I thought more drivers would do it. You mentioned the risks that you had to be on the inside line to make that happen. These drivers very methodically pitted, 2 to go to the restart so that they would be single file at the back. And again, all those cars are not running full speed lap times off of the restart, so you're pitting and losing minimal time. They are over 3 seconds ahead of the next closest car. That is Thomas George, who sits in the number 4 position. So a masterful job by Kamer, Rittenberg, and Jones, but they are not in the clear yet. What happened last time, Justin? We saw a 3-car battle for the race lead. It ended up in calamity. All these cars very much safe to get into the next stage. Do they play nice, though? As the 03 of Jones, now in second, wants to find a way by Kamer.
I would play safe if I was all of them at this point. Just stay single file lining up, because if they get too racy, they can lose a ton of time. They're actually about 3/10 slower a lap right now than all the drivers 4 on back who are trying to scrap for positions for themselves at this point. So at this right now, I'd be telling you, these drivers, if I was their spotters or strategists, calm down. Don't get too racy. Yes, if you feel a little bit quicker, try and make the swap, but don't take too long, because if you side draft to heck, you're going to potentially lose the entire advantage. 5 laps to go this time by. The way, if this time keeps on going down the way it is, all the drivers behind them might catch them by the white flag for the segment.
And of course, the risk here, or I guess the risk versus reward, is that there is no required pit stops in that second segment, which will be 20 laps. So you do want to, I assume, get tires in between now and then. And being pole position for that restart would obviously be a big benefit. So I think that's why Dylan Jones really wanted to get up and around the 8 of Kamer. He has done exactly that. He leads now inside of 5 laps to go in segment number 1. The 8 car of Kamer second now. Rittenberg in third. And I think these drivers, as they continue to lose time on 4th out of back, Jeremy E. Miller having to pass to Thomas George for 4th and 5th position respectively. I think they are going to be able to get to the end of this segment without getting caught, but certainly not playing nice too much, as they have finally single filed things out. So where's the cut line? The top 16's the magic number, and what a fight we have. P15 John Fowler, 16th Brad Bohr, and P17 Tom Morano, all fighting in 3 and 4. 2 of those cars going to make it, one of them's going to go home.
And he might get some luck, because Bohr actually bobbled off the corner. Had to lose some momentum and back off the gas. But Morano just can't get to the right spot quite yet. Now he does. Bohr forced up to the high side. This could be an absolute side-by-side scrap if Morano can play it the right way and get a little bit of help from the driver in 15th place in Fowler and use his aero ducts to pull him in.
They've just got over 2 laps to go to figure this one out. The bobble by the 48 has allowed the 22 to get away, but it is a bad corner exit for John Fowler. Here they come again. Bohr looks high. The 22 is going to shut the door, and to the inside goes Tom Moreno again, side by side, as they all catch Jeremy Bazemore for the final transfer position. 18th is Sean Kalis. He's way out the back end. It is going to be a fight with these 3 or 4 cars. White flag this time at turn 4. Moreno still looking.
The leaders have also been caught by that big pack, but of course that focus heads to the transfer spot. At this point, it's going to be more difficult for Bohr. He's having to back out much more earlier on the outside line right now, looking like he's a bit squirrely off of 4 especially. But I think he's in the right spot. As long as he doesn't smack the wall, he might be in the perfect spot. Now Fowler going to have to play defense on Moreno.
A great photo finish at the front as Jones holds off Horn, but the fight we watch is for the transfer position, and they survive. The 48 car of Bohr makes the pass on Fowler, and Tom Moreno, unable to catch either of them, finishes unofficially in 17th position. That would mean that he, Sean Kalis, Scott Brotherton, Scott McClendon, Jeremy Rittenberg, Rhett McBride, Anthony Fredericks, and Brian V. Macklin would be the drivers who are unable to advance. We will try to get a second look in a moment on the LSR TV replay of that finish up front. Again, priority was to that transfer spot, but it was a great battle for the race lead, Justin. Connor Horn splitting the difference on Jones and Kamer, almost enough to take the number 1 spot, but the 03 held him off.
Horn was the fastest car by far after the pit cycle, and he showed why. He was able to help lead that group and actually pulled away from the rest of the drivers on fresh tires and started just driving that outside line we talked about a little bit, where you're able to have more on-throttle time on the corner exit. Got to the outside quarter panel and Kamer down the backstretch. Then it got dicey because Kamer was side drafting him on the left rear and making contact throughout the entire 3 and 4. So Horn, with a razor-thin difference, was able to just cross between him and Jones, but it wasn't enough because of that battling side-by-side with Kamer. If he had another maybe quarter of a racetrack, you might be talking about Horn taking the race lead at the end of segment 1. Instead, Jones is going to be the one leading them down the pit lane after an exciting finish of the first stage, and everyone's going to have a chance to get back on the same strategy of tires now with this stoppage.
We will see now what the pit strategy is going to be. Dylan Jones was able to win the opening segment of this race. He is going to go right and left side tires. His call is 4, and he will, at a drag race to the line, not win the race off of pit road. Connor Horn, no! The 03, I believe, is going to be scored in front. It looked like Connor Horn had it, but the advantage of being such a good qualifier in the heat races, Justin, is you start right there on that yellow line, and in fact, the 03 machine of Dylan Jones barely had that nose in front at the yellow line. Connor Horn just a millisecond later blew by him, but Horn does, Horn is unable to make the spot, and Jones does hang on to the number 1 position. That could be critical going forward.
That was a difference at the end of the cone of about maybe 3/1000ths of a second. That's how close it was with the angle Jones was able to take because of the close pit box. But the reason I think you're mentioning, of course, there's that importance of him coming first. He's going to be, 1, being able to dictate when these cars go towards the restart zone when we get back underway for stage number 2. But as well, we have seen the Aegis cars tonight be able to, once they get a good launch, play defense, and be able to play defense very well. So I think for Jones, he might be able to get a better launch, try and block that inside line into turn 3 to try and keep the lead, and go from there. It's going to be more difficult, yes, because Horn's been able to have a lot of speed, taking advantage of those aero ducts to pull in the back bumper of the drivers in front, but it could be a different story now that everyone's back on the same set of tires, and everyone's going to be fighting hard for position once more with less laps to work with there, Evan.
So, of course, the top 16 to move on. The rest of the drivers have been eliminated. So, just to recap that again for you, Morano from 17th and now on back. Kalist, Brotherton, McClendon, Rittenberg, McBride, and Fredericks are the drivers who are unable to advance, and they are eliminated at the completion of segment number 1. So let's transition into segment number 2. 20-lap run, this time through. No mandatory pit stop. Drivers can feel free to pit whenever they want over the course of this run, but there is no mandatory pit stop, and barring a caution flag, I would assume most of these cars are to stay out for the course of this 20-lap run. That is, again, assuming that it is caution-free.
Yeah, that's the thing, and what we've seen in Heat Race 1 in the open comes into play. The drivers who were able to stay out and get a little bit of data of if they would be able to do that later on are going to have a chance to maybe have some experience to see if it works out. We also might now, because there's a bit more on the line in terms of positioning, see some drivers, if we get a yellow flag situation, maybe try and dice it up. Take 2 tires to try and get track position if we get a run underneath 5 laps. But those are ifs. Right now, when you know that there's a chance that we can go green at this point for the full 20 laps in this feature, for the second stage rather, you don't want to take any major risk other than for positioning, because only the top 10 drivers will advance to the final segment to decide the winner of the All-Star race.
With the lights out on top of the pace car, we get a look at how we'll rack 'em and stack 'em. Everybody agreeing that the decision is to go for 4 tires. And just to assist you in following along, again, the number on the top of the right-hand side of your screen, again, just some extra laps in case race control needs to massage some things out. So we will restart as we work lap 35 now to take lap number 36. Therefore, 20 laps will complete at the end of lap number 55. So lap 55 on the board will be the white flag lap for segment number 2. We'll walk you through it as this goes on, but a pace car dives down to pit road, and it is now normal restart procedures for Dylan C. Jones. He goes at the restart box, and we are back underway. All-Star segment number 2.
And Jeremy Rittenberg might go all the way back through the field because he has severe damage towards that front bumper right now for the 44 machine. He might be hard to try and work with. He showed a little bit of speed with that top 3 grouping, but watched a few drivers maybe try and work towards the high line to get on by him because of that damage. That can hurt you so much aerodynamically with this package. The race lead, though, back to Horn.
Yeah, Connor Horn does a good job of bouncing it right back, slicing to the inside of the 03 of Dylan Jones, and Connor Horn seems to be an unstoppable force. He got so close at the end of segment number 1, even closer than that off of pit road, and finally has gotten to the race lead. But the 03 and company are not going to go down without a fight. It's Jones up high. You've also got Kamer, Chambliss, the 12 of Shackelford, all lined up at the outside. A much more tightly condensed lead group, as again we look to go from 16 drivers to 10 in this stage. Not nearly the amount of separation that we saw earlier on in this race.
Yeah, these drivers are not letting up or trying to save tires at this point. They're going all out. 3 wide, in fact, into turn 3. It looks like Miller said, Rittenberg, please go to the back. Because now Rittenberg's getting ditched in the old sucker hole at this point. That damage is not making many friends at this point in number 44.
He's not helping him out, and Rittenberg is going to be able to squeeze up into the outside line. He gets it behind Shackelford and in front of Brad Bohr, but the way they sit now certainly drops him a couple of spots, and it was a nice move by Miller and the 9 car at Thomas George to be able to come up on the inside line and get those spots. And just like that, in the blink of an eye, those drivers are top 5, and the 23 of Miller is going to challenge for the race lead here from out of nowhere. Just 2 laps ago, he was outside the top 5. Now he's on the bumper of Horn down low. It's not going to stick that time, but do not count the number 23 Chevy out of this thing.
I don't think you can quite yet. Yes, his teammates up on the inside line. But at this point, I think he's going to go with the fastest driver, the fastest line at this point. Rather, Rittenberg, though, is loose at a 4.
Another bobble for Rittenberg. He continues to struggle, and it's going to cost him more spots there. He got way sideways after he maybe got a nudge from Washington. He hangs on. Thankfully, we don't pile all those cars in, and the battle up front is going to be able to continue. Most of these drivers, I'm sure, are still full on the throttle. A crossover move finds George. That one, the battle for third. He dives to the inside of Miller. Can't make it stick. And once more, the outside line better off the quarter. That's why Jones is able to make this fight up front a battle. The 24 Horde, watch this, nose to nose, but in the middle of the quarter, the bottom is so much better. The great equalizer, though, and they come back off, and the 03 gets a run, and what a move! The 24 blocked, Jones to the inside, and now he's got a good shot in the Aegis Ford.
And that might actually be what Horn wanted. He wanted to get Jones, I think, to go for the crossover. And knowing that he wouldn't be able to get the pass done on the inside, this is actually going to help his teammate in Miller ride by on the high line. That was actually a smart move, a smart racecraft move to force your opponent to overthink himself down off a preferred line. Trouble in the back, though, Shackelford.
Caution flag is out as Skylar Shackelford is into the inside wall. It comes out at lap number 43, and it is the first yellow of segment number 2. And the replay will show that it looked like just a bit of miscommunication. Shackelford moving up the hill. The 22 of Fowler was moving down just a little bit, but certainly the 12 machine, I think, maybe trying to make a move to transition into behind him or something. I think both those drivers fighting for the draft off of the number 45 of Brian Chambliss, and it is going to end up with a heavily damaged John Fowler entry and a wrecked number 12 car.
I'm not sure about that one there. It just looked like Fowler, I think, was trying to maybe get behind Chambliss and just didn't remember, or at least realize, that a car was underneath them that very much close. I think he maybe thought there was more space. Just ends up making the contact. That punch Shackelford down. Also collects Washington with some damage, but you need to have some awareness in this kind of a situation of where the cars are at on the track, or else you're going to have that kind of an incident, especially with this package where it's kind of like we've seen at tracks in the past, like Daytona and Talladega, where you need to manage your runs again while making sure you know where to go for, say, a blocking situation. That time Fowler didn't know. That time it caused an incident. Everyone's down to the pit lane, though.
And no surprise that everybody is going to be down to the pit lane. It is not mandatory. This is all drivers coming in because they feel like, well, fuel's going to give them an upper hand in this race, and I completely agree with them. 4 tires has been the name of the game all night long. It looks like 4 tires going to be continuing to be the call. 4 cars on top of each other off of pit road, but Dylan Jones again winning the race at the stripe.
Yeah, that front end pit box is really helping him out at this point. Like, to be able to get himself going. It's so important. We mentioned it a little bit, not just in course, those tight situations, but in some cases, having one of the first pit boxes either towards the back end of pit lane or one of those last boxes right towards the stripe can be the difference of 1, 2, 3 positions gained every single pit stop depending on who you're driving against. And that's really helping Jones be able to keep up in the front, but he's going to still have those challengers. I think you have to keep an eye on Thomas J. George at this point because while he stayed at the back in the last run, he has been slowly but quietly and methodically been very aggressive at moving up through the pack, plus 10 now since the drop of the green flag after starting 14th at the start of the All-Star.
And I know we talked about late in those heat races and even late in segment number 1, although it's a little bit less of an immediate impact. Let's look back to the end of those heat races. You know, we talk about the risk versus reward of, are you willing to take somebody else out? Is it worth being on that ragged edge, Justin, when you're all, going to be top 5 spots or whatever? Well, of course, the seeding for this race and therefore pit stall selection was given based on the finishing results. So it was easy to say, okay, there's not a huge difference between, I'll finish second in this and end up 4th in the All-Star, or, I'll finish 3rd in this and end up 6th. It's only one spot, one row of a difference. But on pit road, those start to add up. And therefore, I like the way that, we came up with and the admins at RealSimRacing decided to make this all-star race based on qualifying into the heats, and then as well, the heats to set the field for this race, because those heats proving even more important every time we come down pit road.
It's been very crucial, yes indeed. But not just that, I really liked with this format at least, and this was something I was thinking when it was announced too, was that elimination style format, kind of the old style way of doing it from the early 2000s specifically. I can remember with those type of all-star races with the Winston. It kind of gives it not just the importance of the heat races to make sure you have the good track position, but the elimination format gives it a classical old style feel of having to fight from start to finish in every single segment to make sure you have a shot to win at the end of the night in this kind of an all-star race.
And we are past now the halfway point in this second segment, and the lights on top of the iRacing.com pace car have been extinguished. So the restart will come with what I believe is going to be 8 laps to go. Again, you need to look at the top of your screen. Lap number 55 in this race is going to be the last lap of this second stage. So keep that in mind as we get set to close out this 20-lap run to the end. Jones, Miller, Horn, George, all your players to be expected up front, going to be a part of this. But P10 is where you got to look at, and right now that's occupied by Brad Bohr. Had a little bit of a rough go there on that last exchange, couple of close calls, especially had to really scratch and claw to get his way out of that opening segment. He's P10 right now, last driver in. Jonathan Cadell, P11, the first driver out. So those are certainly going to be drivers we're going to be looking at here as we come to the restart.
Yeah, I think with Cadell, it's going to be a very aggressive kind of racing from that 69 machine now, because I feel like if he can get a run towards especially the outside, knowing Bohr struggles on the exit of turn 4, he can try and make this pass, get himself into the final stage after being so quiet so far in this all-star race, trying to avoid any incidents. I see now, knowing there's a chance that he might not make it to the final 10 laps if he doesn't make this pass now. That's going to push him to be even more aggressive once the green flag flies right about now.
And it is an early jump for the 03. Dylan Jones checks out. Green flag in the air. It is going to bring that 24 of Connor Horn with him. Rocketed into P2. Miller drops to the inside, protected what is now third.
Yeah, good launch again from the front drivers. But keep an eye on that battle for 10th position, because Cadell looked like he got a better start, in fact, than Bohr. The problem is, he couldn't take advantage of the run because he got held up by Matt Miller. He's able to clear the pass, though. He's up to 10th position. Now he has to defend, though, because he's got just as quick of a car behind him in Jeremy Bazemore.
And that's a lot of speed in all of these cars. They're not content with being 5th, 6th, or whatever it is. It is going to be enough to get you into the final segment of this race. But can you win from P6? You need that extra spot. It all comes down to what will likely be one more pit stop in between and one final restart as they get set to fight for that 10-lap dash to the end. Side by side now, 3 wide for the final transfer position. It's 10th. Cadell has it that time at the line. Matt Miller looking for it in the 78 car behind that roadblock.
Yeah, Washington's actually dropping back because that rear end damage as well as some front end damage that he now has from that last caution flag. That's going to help out Miller here. But that might allow more pressure and a bigger run from behind potentially from Bazemore if he can time it up. Washington drops back. Miller moves himself up to the transfer spot for the time being. He's going to still have to play defense, though, for the next 5+ laps.
And we'll see if he is going to be able to keep that car wide enough for enough time. This battle for second is really not that far ahead of the battle for 10th, so makes it easy for us. We're able to monitor both of them as Jones now side by side for the race lead. Connor Horn once more. That continuous force to the outside as the 24 car goes to the race lead. Had a good result 2 weeks ago at Dover, looking for a win in this Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series. And while yes, the All-Star race doesn't technically count towards career stats, he would certainly take it and is in a very good position next time by. We look for 3 laps to go.
And we've mentioned so many times Horn being so close, tracks like Bristol and Dover, where he had a chance to come away with the checker flag, but came away with heartbreak. This, while it may not be on the official stats, Evan, would be huge to continue to build some momentum to find his way into victory lane for the official schedule in a points-paying race. That could be absolutely huge to help Horn's season as he continues to defend behind his teammate. George, though, might have a shot to try and make a battle for second spot on that high side.
And P10 still fighting. Miller has the spot. Bazemore in the number 1 car needs it. They are right now side by side for the final transfer position with that 78 of Miller on the outside and the 1 car of Bazemore on the inside. And they are not the only players. They could catch up to Cadell and Bohr in front of them, but also look behind him. You got Jones, Rittenberg right on top of them as this battle is going to come down to 1 lap to go in segment 2. Connor Horn, a car length lead.
And Miller's back up to the front now, in fact, to the point this lead. They're actually checking up a little bit on the bottom side. Miller's going to have to play defense. That battle for 10th position, though, is going to get awfully close. Bazemore going to have to defend the runs from Miller, and not just that, Andrew T. Jones, who's looking to try and draft off the back of Miller into 4.
It's all Jeremy E. Miller now, but at turn 4. Hill wins stage number 2, and the battle for the transfer spot to the inside goes Miller, outside for Rittenberg, but neither of them can make the move in time, and Jeremy Bazemore, P10, hangs on and will be the final driver into the 3rd and final segment of the All-Star, eliminating Miller, Rittenberg, Jones, Washington, Shackelford, and Fowler.
That was a very exciting race for sure to decide that transfer spot, end up at the front. But now this is going to get absolutely dramatic, I think, for these final 10 laps. You got a mix of drivers who have been towards the front a majority of the time so far. But you also got drivers like Jonathan Cadell that have been playing it conservative, just trying to make sure they get just enough spots to make sure they're in the final segment. I think now with only a 10-lap shootout to go, the intensity level is going to crank itself to 11, and we're going to see guys like Cadell, like Bohr, like Chambliss try and push even more harder, even force a 3 wide if they have to, for a chance to win tonight's All-Star race.
And now we await what will be probably the final trip down to the pit lane. I can see you coming in if we split that final segment to the end. However, you come down, you get your 4 tires now, and this is the money stop. I mean, they have all been important. The qualifying single car has been important, and so on and so forth. But all of these drivers now are going to come down to the pit lane, take their 4-tire stop, which is required by the rules before this segment begins. Of course, I think they all would have taken 4 tires here anyways, so not a huge burden on the drivers, Justin, but they are going to come in, get 4 tires. You got to execute. Get into the box clean, get out of the box clean. Jeremy E. Miller is going to come down for the race lead. Dylan Jones is 3rd. Could the 03 pull off another couple of spots on the pit lane?
I'm curious about that as well. He did get held up a little bit, actually, by 2nd place on the pit entry in George, where they both had to lock up the brakes. That lost him about a car length down the lane and might lose him a chance for the lead. And here comes Horn, Miller, and the rest of the pack. Miller comes out first.
So it is Miller leading off, but again, even a slow entry to pit lane can't stop him. Dylan Jones gets a position, leapfrogging Thomas J. George. So the 9 car is going to end up in 3rd position in this race off of the pit lane. Actually, it looks like the 9 car and the 8 car pretty close in their race off of the pit lane. But Connor Horn does go from 2nd to 3rd spot. Another position gained for Jones. I don't know if that really helps him in this case because it's been 50-50 tonight. Sometimes inside, outside, pretty neck and neck, and sometimes, you know, the inside takes off. And I think especially because of the fact that Miller leading this race because it is restart procedure and not green flag procedure, Justin, dictating the start. Even though Jones passed George, I think Thomas J. George, the 24 Connor Horn, who was 2nd but is now 3rd, assuming the 24 machine can catch the cues of the 23 and go, he'll probably actually end up with a better race start than Jones will, despite actually technically losing a spot to him there on pit road.
One thing people don't think about when it comes to teammates, yes, they're going to be fighting each other as hard as possible. One thing that is an advantage that people don't think about is they are in the same grouping together. They can communicate and count each other down. This is when I'm going to slam down on the gas pedal to try and time up the restart to be able to pull away from Jones. These got that advantage on the inside line. The thing is, though, that I think you might not see too, Evan, though, this the same case on the outside line. Jones is going to have help with Eric Stanford, in fact, behind him in the 4th position because of how they racked up on that pit exit with them being so bunched up and so close at the stripe. It's going to be a battle between Aegis on the outside, Harumbone Racing on the inside line. Which one's going to communicate the best is going to be question number 1. Question 2 is, which ones are going to be able to work together enough to try and find a way to the lead and find a way to hold on to said lead, knowing that it's been so difficult to hold on to it on the exit entrance of turn number 3 because of how loose a couple of the drivers have gone and trying to go from bottom to top, back to bottom.
And it looks like, as we line up, I get to mention that the 85 laps is a buffer, that assuming the lights go out on top of the pace car now, we will take lap 60, we will take the green flag at lap number 61. That lap 70 will be the scheduled end of this stage. That is 10 laps from the end of it. But the stakes are higher now than ever. We eliminated 8 drivers. We took another 4 off of the board. I guess we started with 24. We took 8 off the board down to 16. We took another 6 off the board. 10 drivers remain. Full running order at the top of your screen. But the way it looks, it is Jeremy E. Miller and Dylan Jones on the front row. Connor Horn and Eric Stanford on the second. Kyle Kamer, Thomas George, P5 and 6. Brian Chambliss, Jonathan Cadell, 7 and 8. And Jeremy Bazemore along with Brad Bohr, 9-10. That is row number 5. Stakes are higher now than ever. There is no transfer position to look at. It is only the checkered flag up for grabs in this 2019 All-Star race. You make it 10 laps in one piece is the big question.
I'm not really sure what we're going to see, especially on the 2nd and 3rd laps of this. I think that's going to dictate how the rest of the final 10 laps are going to go and how aggressive people are going to be. Again, I don't think drivers are going to lift as much now, knowing this is the chance for all the marbles to win the prize, to come away with the trophy. There's a reason they say it's checkers or wreckers when it comes to the All-Star race. The question is, which one's going to come away with the checker flag? Which one's going to come away with just a steering wheel?
Green flag in the air. Let's go racing one more time. 10 laps to go in the 2019 Sim Racers for Mental Health All-Star Race. Miller on the inside. He gets the advantage, and there is Connor Horn. Despite losing the race to Jones on pit road, uses the inside to take second. He'll push Miller down the back straightaway to turn 3.
And a lot of the teammates actually starting to work together on this start. You got the Harumbone drivers now behind each other on the inside line. The Aegis cars lined up as well. And Thomas J. George, who was lined up at one point with his teammate Jonathan Cadell for Steel Horse Racing. This is starting to get very dicey, like a Talladega and Daytona race. But eventually, somebody's going to have to give when these tires go down. George, underneath the blue line down the backstretch.
In the 9, going to go away to the inside. It gets down on Stanford, 3 wide. That fight for 5th, the 45 at Chambliss. He gets roughed up on the outside, and then on to George. Finds his way through, pushing to the inside of Kamer, scoring at the start-finish line in the number 5 position. Meanwhile, up front, Connor Horn to the race lead again in the Speedway Chevrolet. It seems like no matter how many times he loses that top spot at the end of a stage on pit road, he gets back to it. The 24 so good, but he needs to close this one out.
Yeah, it's going to be all about defense at this point. See him move up from the inside to the high side. Jones not giving him any sort of slack, giving him the bump draft. But Miller actually was able to carry more speed that time on the inside line. Can he keep it is the question. The answer is no. Jones is going to bump draft him back in the tango.
2 by 2, you are right. It's like an old school restrictor plate. 2 cars dancing low, 2 cars dancing high as they are side by side in battle for what is first and second, third and fourth. But in reality, they are all fighting for the checkered flag from Charlotte. 5 laps to go the next time by. It is now Miller who sticks the nose out in front as these drivers are just gonna run out of good tires by the time this segment comes to an end. Right now, probably still full on the gas. 180 was the center corner speed that time.
And that's extremely quick, even with these kind of cars. Miller's going to try and keep this low. That is the better line on the inside on the fresher tires. By the time they get to lap 10, though, that high line where Horn is at is going to be so much more advantageous even in the apex off. And we've already seen the effect down the backstretch. Miller's going to have the drive of his life to hold on for this position, especially knowing the speed that Horn's got. Crash in the backdrop, though.
Caution off the back. It is the number 1 at Jeremy Bazemore. He's through the grass and into the outside wall.
No, we stay green. We stay green.
No caution. We have stayed green as those 2 wrecked in battle for 9th and 10th. And your race leaders are going to have clear track in front of them as they enter 3 and 4, so it is not going to be a factor. It is Miller still on the inside, but now the only car on the inside. Horn, everybody else up top, now they all go low. Dylan Jones trying to block Thomas George. He slices to the inside. Chambliss is back in the picture with 3 to go.
And Miller's getting too tight. He might push Horn up. Here comes George. He might have a shot. No, he can't. They're going to go side by side now. Make it now for 3rd position. Jones pushes Horn back up to the race lead. Miller nearly hits him. George in the wall.
He drove it too hard. The handling is going away on the Jeremy E. Miller machine. First, he nearly threw the race lead away. And at that time, roughs up Thomas George, who's into the outside wall. 2 laps to go. Connor Horn cleared track in front of him as Miller fights with the 03 of Dylan Jones for second. Do they figure out this fight, or is that battle going to keep them from getting to your race leader? More contact now in turn 3.
I don't know if this is going to be far enough yet for Horn. He might be able to defend. White flag in the air. One of the fastest cars on the track. Can he hold on to it is the question.
He's got a 3/10 of a second advantage. Jeremy E. Miller needs an incredible lap on ailing tires if he wants to catch up to Connor Horn in the number 24 car. Beaten and banged up, some left side damage, that didn't matter. He had the determination, he had the speed, and at a turn number 4, he'll have an all-star win. Connor Horn, checkered flag, your 2019 all-star winner.
And a heck of a performance for Horn. Was one of the fastest cars all throughout the event tonight. Stayed up at the front the entire event tonight, even with that damage. He was still able to maintain the speed that he had from start to finish. And guess what? He'll be able to celebrate not just a victory tonight, his first of 2019, while unofficial with the All-Star format. He'll be able to celebrate a 1-2 with his teammate and Jeremy E. Miller down the front stretch.
And he is going to celebrate this one to get out an opportunity to chat with him after Dover. Said he really wanted one of these wins, led so many laps to that one, and well, it may not show up on the official stat sheet. Can you tell he's excited or what? What a burnout for Connor Horn, celebrating the win in this Sim Racers for Mental Health All-Star race. What a night of action, top to bottom, from the single car qualifying through the heats and all the segments, green all the way. In that final 10-lap run to the end, Jeremy E. Miller just couldn't have enough. It goes back to what we said in the very first minute of this broadcast, Justin. We talked about tires. That 10 laps or so is about the max you could do on keeping that car flat-footed all the way around. And I think Jeremy E. Miller had a great car. But it was a great car for 8 laps, and you could see that 10-lap run to the end, those 2 extra laps, he couldn't keep that car on the bottom. Horn zipped around on the outside, and a well-deserved victory for that number 24 Chevy team.
You hit it right on the head. He knew when the tire wear would start to flip towards the high side, knew the advantages of the run on the high side, and just played himself to the point where He got to where he needed to be right at that point. If he was stuck at the bottom, we might be talking about a completely different race. But a heck of a performance again for Horn to be able to manage this race tonight. Not just him, but for Miller. We should note there was, of course, as you see on your screen, that crash at the start and finish line. That kind of mixed things up with a finishing order, yes. But you can't give away any sort of doubt and any sort of slack to the performance we've seen from Dylan Jones. He held on to the top three as long as he could, all the way to that crash of the stripe. It could have been his race if he was able to get in the right position at the right time.
Yeah, what you cannot say coming out of this race is that any of these drivers did not give it 110%. Let's look top to bottom at your LSR TV full race results. So for your top 10 drivers in this final segment, Connor Horn gets the win. The final margin of victory, 0.542 seconds over Jeremy E. Miller, Thomas J. George, Dylan Jones, and Kyle Kamer, your top 5. Chambliss and Stanford, 6-7, able to finish on the lead lap. Unable to make it to the end, Jonathan Cadell, Brad Bohr, and Jeremy Bazemore through your top 10. But as they say, if you're not first, you're last. And that's the case at the All-Star. It's all about bragging rights. And that right belongs solely to that of the number 24 machine. We are going to try to go trackside with them in just a moment here. But, Justin, let's take a look as well through the drivers from outside the top 10.
Yes, indeed. David Washington was the first driver out at the end of the second stage with Kurt Rittenberg. Both of them with damage, not able to make it to the final stage. Matt Miller fought as hard as he could, finished in 13th, however. Andrew T. Jones' season of nightmares continues after that Final Four run last year. Has continued to struggle, finished 14th. Skylar Shackelford, after the crash down the backstretch, finished 15th after the incident with John Fowler. Tom Morano was fighting hard for that transfer spot at the end of stage number 1. Elected to keep his car clean and drive clean. Couldn't get to that final spot. He finished in front of Sean Kalis with Scott Brotherton and Scott McClendon in 19th and 20th. To round out the drivers who took the green flag for the All-Star race, it was Jeremy Rittenberg, Rhett McBride, and Anthony Fredericks who were all crashed out in that first stage. One driver did not make the green flag after competing in the Open. That was Brian Spriggs. He'll finish unofficially in 24th.
That is a complete look top to bottom at your LSR TV full race results. And again, by order of elimination, a good recap of the action we saw here tonight. But standing by in RealSimRacing Cup Series Victory Lane is the driver of the number 24 machine. Connor Horn comes out on top tonight for the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Connor, congratulations. Just tell us about this one. I know it's an unconventional way, an unconventional race to find yourself finally back, and in Victory Lane with us on a Monday night. But certainly that car looked dialed in, and you had to overcome a number of challenges, but in the end, you get it done.
Oh my god, it's about damn time. I mean, my favorite driver is Kyle Larson. He wins the All-Star race, and so do I. I guess it's a coincidence in some way, but I knew when I got to the outside on that last run, I really had a good feeling that I had it won, because I knew unless Dylan took me 3 wide or Thomas put 3 wide on the bottom, no one was really passing me. The only way I would have lost that race if my teammate Jeremy got clear of me out of one of the turns, but he didn't. He washed up out of 2. I was lucky to move up and get around that, and then Dylan tried to do a little bump and run into 1. I luckily saved that, and that let Jeremy get back under him, and I think I was smooth sailing from there. It was just a crazy race with the left rear damage I got after the green flag pit stops. I almost won that. Pretty much ran up front after that. Just a crazy race. I'm glad I finally won something.
And let's rewind all the way back to where the night started. You guys actually, you were able to get the best time in the single car qualifying, which puts you in a good spot to start the heat race. But of course, that one didn't necessarily end the way you would have hoped after you came home in 7th position in that one. So just tell us about your approach to get into this, because you were pretty close to the cutoff line, but you had a good amount of laps, knowing that that first segment, 30 laps, the top 16 would make it, and you starting this main event in 13th position. And just kind of describe how you guys broke down through the segments. Of course, that mandatory pit stop into segment number 2 and all of that, which puts you in position to, of course, capitalize on this opportunity late with our 10-lap run to the end, which somehow was able to make it without incident.
Yeah, well, in the heat race, I'm lucky. I'm actually happy I didn't pit in the heat race because it gave me an idea of how bad the tires would fall off, and I had a feeling David would try a door slam like that. But it is what it is. I wasn't really upset about it. But when I started back there, I knew I was close to the cut line, but I knew with the mandatory stop, I was gonna pit right away, and I felt like I was gonna be pretty safe. And then with the caution coming out at just the perfect time for the people in the back to pit coming to the green on 15, I wasn't able to do that. My strategy changed from pitting the earliest to pitting the latest because I know these tires really don't wear out that quickly, and also the cars take a couple laps to get wound up. And so I pit as late as possible with the 20. I actually passed them entering pit road. I got a very good entrance in the pit road, got out, almost won the stage, and then stayed up front. Had a little teammate, just teammate help from Jeremy in the 23. We were really helping each other. We were controlling the pack ever since we got up to 1-2, and I gave him the inside to pass me to keep us up there, and then he didn't really return the favor, which I gotta expect at the end of one of these races. I ended up third. I knew if I got out third on the pit stops, I was in a good spot, which I did. We timed the last restart perfectly. I was able to get to his outside. I knew if I boxed in Dylan, that was the best case scenario for me. That's exactly what we did. And I knew if I was on the outside compared to the 23 Jeremy, I was going to be able to win this race with a good chance, and that's exactly what happened. We played it to perfection.
We are not going to go far. The race next up Monday night going to be back here at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Of course, it is going to be a very different kind of race as that one sees 150 laps on the board. But of course, points come back into effect, and I'm sure you're hoping that this breakthrough here tonight is going to translate to a race win that comes with a lot of points associated with it. Did you learn anything tonight that you can bring into that race, and do you feel like you're in as good a position as any, including tonight's win, but of course the great performances you've had in the last few weeks to get a W when points are on the line?
I think I'm overdue 2 or more wins for sure. I mean, I finished third like 3 times to 3 different people, and I probably should have won at least 2 of those races. I think I'm definitely one of the hottest drivers out there right now. I think the only one that could match me, just ahead of me, is Andrew, because, you know, he's Andrew. We know how he can perform, but I learned a lot about how the cars push up, how the tires wear. The aero push gets especially worse on a run, and we're obviously going to have longer green flag runs next week, so I just got to expect it to get a little bit worse than that. Really not much looseness in the car, tight pretty much all the way around. So it's definitely a good race to learn a lot, but it was definitely a good race to win and get my mojo going.
We will let you get out of here and get to celebrating all-star races and bragging rights. They're always fun to be able to pick up a W, give you a good confidence booster. Before we do set you free, Connor, any other sponsors or shout-outs you want to say hi to?
Yeah, obviously Speedway for coming on board this weekend. This week, shout out to them. My teammates, me and Jeremy hooked up really well, as I said, to close this one out for our team. Finally, first win in here. Points race or not, it's a pretty big win. Chambliss, Shackelford, they're really big helps for what we do. NZXT, Menards, and everyone involved. Shout out to them.
We certainly appreciate you giving us your time here post-race, and as well, of course, being a part of this series and competing on a week-by-week basis. Without everybody on track, we've got no show, so thanks for that. But Connor, as well, thanks for joining us. Congratulations on the win. For your sake, I hope it's the first of many to come, and we look to see what you got next Monday night.
I'll make sure it's the first of many. Thank you, Evan.
The race winner tonight in the Sim Racers for Mental Health All-Star Race, Connor Horn on the board in the number 24 Chevrolet. Part of that great battle at the end saw Jeremy Miller come home in second. Trackside with him is Justin.
Thank you very much, Evan. Jeremy Miller coming away in second. It was a heck of an all-star race here tonight. Tell us through what was going through your mind as the race went on, as you were up towards the front as the laps started to wind on down here at Charlotte.
Yeah, it was probably the hardest I've ever driven a race car, especially with no points on the line. I was just trying to make sure either me or Connor finished first, but I definitely wanted to beat him out there at the end. Almost wrecked us both coming out of 2 with 2 to go, but we were able to hold on for a 1-2 finish.
I was going to ask you about that. How was that car feeling? Because according to Connor, you got tight. Was that indeed the case? And why do you think that was, especially with that being towards the end of the run, towards where you can go full throttle to where you start to get out of the gas rather?
I knew it was a 10 lap shootout for the win, so I was pushing my car as hard as it possibly can, and I was squealing the tires in every corner. It was just starting to get out the end. They held on just long enough though. If that went another lap, I probably would have dropped a couple spots.
How difficult was it to try and pass tonight for this kind of a race, and with so much of the intensity level pushed up from start to finish, it seemed?
It was extremely tough to pass, but that kind of worked out into my favor because I felt like I was up front for most of the race, and I had a teammate with me the entire time to work with, and that really helped as well down the straightaways, having a bumper to give you that little edge.
If you didn't have, let me ask you this in this way. Hey, let's say, how difficult was it when you didn't have a teammate? Should rather say. Hey, compared to when you were able to have a teammate to work with in the field, to cut up through the traffic, to find your way back up towards the front. Because we've seen in a couple cases, a lot of the drivers that were lined up towards that final restart were actually teammates that were bumper to bumper.
It was really hard to pass on your own. You had to work at it for several laps, and even then you weren't guaranteed to get the spot. I had quite a few battles where I didn't work out, and I just killed my tires being side by side with somebody for way longer than I probably should have been.
Now, as we head off towards the next points-paying race here at Charlotte, the longest race on the schedule, 150 laps, what is going through your mind knowing what you learned today from the All-Star race and what you can take towards next week when there's going to be potentially much longer runs in that race?
I'm definitely not going to be pushing as hard next week. As fun as it might have been, you just can't afford to do it when you have the potential of a really long green flag run and need to go through all the fuel. The tires will absolutely not last racing like that in a full run, but it definitely should be pretty similar racing, at least on the restarts, but when we get deeper into the runs, I think it'll be a completely different race.
Now, before we let you go, is there anyone you want to thank here for tonight's action, a part of your team's 1-2 finish here in the All-Star race?
I want to thank all of our partners, NZXT on my car and Berlin Raceway. Connor has Speedway recently added for us. ODMB for Brian Chambliss and Hammer Bowling for Scour Shackleford tonight. And I want to thank my family who's watching tonight for supporting me.
Thank you very much for the time. Congratulations on your team's 1-2 finish here in the All-Star race.
Thanks.
That was Jeremy Miller coming away in second tonight. Now joining me side by side is Thomas J. George, who came away in third, in part because of a crazy crash coming to the checker flag. Thomas, crazy all-star race. You worked your way to the back through many of the segments tonight, along with your teammate Jonathan Caddell. Talk us through how your evening went from your perspective.
It was just a blur.
Huh.
You just had to make the moves where you thought you could make them, and I just, I just made them where I thought they were the best time to do it. I mean, that last segment I screwed myself and put the damn thing out of gear and put it into neutral, then get off of pit road, so I go from second to sixth. I'm like, well, it's the All-Star race, and I usually don't do this in the points race, so to heck with it. Let's just go ahead and go for broke. I guess it's the that's the way this package is. I can say that much.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looked like once we got to around segment 2, that's where it seemed, I noticed you starting to make a lot of aggressive moves once you punched your ticket in towards the final parts of the All-Star race, including that bold 3-wide move, mind you, underneath the blue line down the apron. How difficult was it to try and keep that aggression level up while trying to make sure you didn't make any contact with anybody in this race?
I don't necessarily think it's difficult. You just have to be aware of your surroundings, and some people are more aware of it than others. That move I particularly made, that was reminiscent of one hot night in Charlotte, and I said, you know what, the heck with it, let's just do the same thing here. And the only difference was I had to look out the side. Is the 19 going to move up, or is he going to keep me down there? And am I going to have to lift? And if he had moved up, I would have had to lift. That would have been more or less my race there. I mean, these cars, you got to make the moves when you have the fresh tires, because there's just no horsepower in these things. I'm not the biggest fan of them, but they do put on some good racing. But once it gets strung out, it's pretty hard to make up any track position. But then again, that's how these cars have been the last 4 to 5 years. So I guess controlled aggression is the word, but I don't know there is such a thing. Maybe calculated.
I think calculate is actually the correct word, I should say, in terms of that context. But let's move on, of course, to the next points paying race. Back here at Charlotte, it's a longer race, of course, 150 laps. One of the longest, if not the longest race on the schedule for 2019, of course, as per as well in real life. What do you expect to be different compared to what we've seen tonight in the All-Star race?
I think, well, it's difficult to say with this package. I think the opening stages, I think you're going to see a little bit of aggression. I think you might see a caution or two, which I would prefer not to have happen. And then once those get out of the way, I think we'll probably get some long green runs, and then more than likely we'll get a caution with 20 to go, and then it's just going to be the same as this is. So it's just, at least in my experience, that's what it's been. I don't think you're going to see the same moves next week on Monday night that you saw the night. It's just when it's the All-Star race and there's no points on the line, and you're just trying to go out there. It's almost like a practice test. What can you do? What can't you do? And then you kind of incorporate that to, it's like, okay, it's time to get back to business, try to get a win, try to get some points. And I used to say that Charlotte was probably one of my top 3 best tracks, but with this package, I don't know how it's going to be. So it's going to be an interesting one to see how it plays out.
Is there anyone you want to thank before we let you go here tonight? Actually, before I get towards that question, and of course, your team tonight, Jonathan Goodell specifically, was running with the Mission 22 fundraising colors tonight as part of the Steel Horse Racing. He's fundraising week to try and raise $1,000 through Tiltify for the fight against veteran suicide. If you can, or have the knowledge to, would you like to talk about that if you can, please?
I can remember some of it. Essentially, what Mission 22 is just to help any veterans that come back from combat duty and basically have a tough time readjusting to normal society. It's suicide prevention, basically, not just that, but a lot of other things that they help with to help veterans get through, anything from PTSD to traumatic injuries. And it's a very good cause. Actually a very great cause. We do it every year. Cadell, especially with what he does with it. And if you want to donate to it, you can go to their website, or you can go to twitch.tv/SteelHorseRacingLive, and you can donate from there. He takes all the proceeds, as you mentioned. He puts it all to Mission 22. I highly encourage it, even if it's just $1. If we can get 1,000 people just to give $1, that's what I always say. $1 can make all the difference if you get enough people to do it. So I would highly encourage it. I believe anybody that comes back from any injury, from any situation, needs all the support they can get, which brings me on to this next topic. And I don't mean to just segue to it, but I will say, I don't know if you've heard the news or if anybody else has, but Formula One legend Niki Lauda has passed, and of course he had his injuries from the fiery crash he had many, many years ago, and he had a lot of support to get him through those tough times. So while it may not necessarily be the same thing for veterans in terms of life choices, they go through a lot more with a lot less, support than somebody like Lauda did. But nonetheless, everybody needs it, and it'd be a great help from anybody watching this just to do what you can. I mean, just $1, even $1 will help in any way, shape, and form.
Some great words, Thomas. Thank you very much. Real quickly, is there anything else you'd like to add or anyone you want to thank before we let you go tonight?
Like I said, I'd just like to thank you guys for broadcasting, Brian for doing all the prep work, even though it was a little weird, a little finicky. My teammates, obviously, I know we didn't have the finish we've had, but we had the cars to do it. Unfortunately, my teammate got dumped there by somebody in the 98, I think. So I don't want to go any further than that, because if I do, it's not gonna stop. And then of course, Rhett got caught up there. Anthony got caught up in the wreck, and Cadell got put in the wall. So did I. It's racing. We had good cars, so I like to just thank all of them and everybody back at the other side of the shop there to being part of this. I mean, it's always fun. We just we want to win, but it's always fun to have racing. And again, thank you guys for broadcasting. And again, go to Mission 22 or go to Cadell's Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Steelers Racing Live. Donate some money, please. We're begging you for it. Everybody needs a little help.
Thank you very much for the touching words, Thomas. You have a wonderful night.
All right. Thank you, sir. Take care.
You as well. That was Thomas J. George coming away with third officially on the board tonight. And Evan, I think a lot of those words Thomas said had just talk about the importance, of course, of charity when it comes to the Mission 22. Of course, with the paint scheme tonight, we've seen with Jonathan Cadell trying to raise money all the way up to the iRacing Coca-Cola 600 on the NAS service here this upcoming weekend. But that, I think, capitulates what was a great all-star race here tonight from start to finish for these drivers, from competitive, from the transfer spot all the way up to the race lead. It was a heck of a wild night tonight under the stars here on the Mile and a Half circuit.
Very fitting that, we go racing under the stars for the all-star race. It is always fun to be able to bring this event to you on LSR TV and the iRacing Esports Network. You mix it up a little bit. We could have some fun with the format and the eliminations and all that. And as we alluded to it a bit in the interviews, and again, big thanks to our top three for giving us some time here post-race to chat with them. Connor Horn, Jeremy Miller, and Brian Chambliss, but as well, it's a bit of a learning process. This is still a new package, and we will see, I think, a much more conventional but still excited race when we return here to the Charlotte Motor Speedway next Monday night. Same cars, same track, same setting, arguably more on the line. And you heard, in those post-race interviews, Justin, the drivers made it clear that they got to be, I don't know if a little bit smarter is the right word, but a little bit more conservative. We barely made it, those final 10 laps, and it was exciting, but you're going to have to dial it in a bit to go 150. So points on the line, back to business as we close in now on what is going to be the halfway point of the regular season here in 2019. It is round number 11 of 22 or 23, I should say, regular season races. So right on the money there almost with being halfway home. These races going to be more and more important on a week-by-week basis, and we certainly hope that everybody at home tuning in tonight joins us next week and from there on out as we battle towards now the ultimate goal of the 2019 championship.
Yeah, consistency is going to be more and more important for these drivers. We have seen a lot of good performances, but that battle we were talking about, we've been seeing, continues to intensify heading into the Charlotte race next week. You've got guys like Scott Brotherton, Jeremy E. Miller, Scott McClendon, Sean Kalis, the Rittenbergs, all that have a chance to try and battle for that final bubble spot. And on top of that, drivers that have had a roller coaster season that are going to be trying to fight for a much-needed points day, such as Andrew T. Jones we've seen so far this season, Anthony Fredericks coming into the 12th spot. I think it's going to be an exciting race, and I'm curious to see how the strategies all play out, knowing that it's at the very least a 2-stop plus race for these drivers. Who will be able to execute the best strategies? We'll have to wait and see next week.
And we certainly hope that you join us then until we get to round number 11 of this 2019 campaign. That is going to do it for us here tonight from the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway. I do want to say on behalf of our entire team at LSR TV, the folks behind the scenes, the people in the booth at a week-by-week basis, and of course for your broadcast team tonight, for our producer Brett Wheeler, for Justin Prince, and myself, Evan Pasoko, want to thank you for tuning in and congratulate Connor Horn. He's got a win in the Full Throttle Cup Series, but of course he wants to make it official. He wants it in the stat book, and he is going to be able to do that in 1 week's time. Next time out, Monday, May the 27th. It is a 9 Eastern start once more from the Charlotte Motor Speedway. That race and every race of the 2019 Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series, powered by Sim Racers for Mental Health, can be found right here on LSR TV and the iRacing Esports Network. Until next time, good night from Charlotte. This broadcast is the copyrighted work of LSR TV, and it may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Live Sim Racing LLC and iRacing.com Motorsport Simulations. LSR TV would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.